Hello, my name is Hayden Wayne. This is the Healing Channel, Episode 9. Today I'll be reading from Look Both Ways, Episode 4. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you. Dreams are access portals to astral dimensions with no limitations of time or space. We think of an event horizon. An event horizon is determined by the observer, who is dependent upon observational ability, proportionally moving the horizon within the distance of her capability. An event horizon may be no further than the tip of one's nose, if that. But for those who think within a cosmological context, we should be able to expand the event horizon infinitely. This inner-outer edge contains all we know and all we first wish to know. As toroidal as is the interspatial content, what if its perimeter folded like a Mobius strip of interior-exterior, uniting inter- and superspatial dimensions, continually twisting onto itself on a quanta level, ultimately magnifying itself into a cohesive singular fluid membrane which infinitely expands, contracts upon itself within its own event horizon singularity? And even if traveling from event edge to edge, demonstrating time, the singularity within its dimensional existent oneness has no time. Time only exists when consciously examining the interspatial content. There is no superspatial because of its Mobius nature. A metaphorical cohesiveness of quantum neuroplasticity. It is this plasticity that allows us the ability to observe ourselves within and without because of the commonality of communicative skill set. Consciousness is the singularity. Does this infer beyond this realm is ignorance? Do our assumptions increase the interspatial mass? Was there only one Big Bang, or a continuum synaptic initiation of thought? If thought is a singularity, initiation, bang, inflation, 10 to the minus 23 seconds. Scholar field, having magnitude, not direction. Every point in space, a physical quality or dimensionless mathematical number. The distribution of matter in any part of the universe, isotropic, having the same values when measured in any direction, continually expanding, pushing its outer hypothesis. Is there volume outside of thought? Does anything exist outside of thought? And then there's time. Point to point, thought to thought. Everything in the cosmos vibrates. Thus everything has a tone in continual counterpoint. I propose, when we figure out the resonating qualities of every vibrating wave, we will first master the complete integration of consciousness, telepathic, teleclinetic, mass integration through reflective vibration, breaking the bonds of gravity, expanding and contracting time in infinite variances of keys, tonalities caused by energy, frequency, and vibration, which have been here since initiation, lowering in pitch as our cosmology expands, playing its music through endless possibilities of waves within the totality of the orchestration of mind, reinforcing the feedback of endless loops, sympathetic to the vibration emitted. Thus, it is essential to find the vibration of the outcome you wish to attract. Sound clearly affects matter. Since matter cannot be created or destroyed, it is resonance that causes design, intelligent in the respect of the feedback loops it creates, arranging the quanta upon quanta, expanding its mass into infinite molecular outcome. I propose the totality of totality, 4/3 pi times the cube of density of mass divided by its volume, times plus or minus horizontal, vertical depth, times time infinitely, where negative infinity is less than any real number and positive infinity is greater than the real number, where pi equals 3.1415926535897932384626433. Density equals mass divided by volume times plus or minus x plus minus y plus minus z times time equals the radius, where p is density, m is mass, v is volume, x horizontal axis, y vertical axis, z depth axis, time infinity. The concept of curvature is very interesting. The tighter the curve, it will close itself on to a Planck scale point, 10 to the minus 44, a singularity, the beginning of creation. The wider it unfolds itself, the closer to a straight line. If we accept space as curved, it seems there would be an event horizon by what contains the interspatial content. Within this infinite vast containment, the speed of light will inevitably create an event horizon where material emanating photon waves that are beyond the distance of the speed of light will never arrive for our viewing, will never reach us within our lifetime. We know photons become excited upon examination. So if these photons cannot be viewed, it seems that they will not only not get excited, but may not be there within the realm of consciousness. Again, I ask, does anything exist beyond conscious thought? Physicists know Erwin Schrödinger's equation characterizing the duality of wave particles allowed them to calculate the probability of where a photon or any subatomic particle's location would manifest itself from its spreading wave after it hit a detection plate, not before, but after. And if light doesn't reach us, does that infer whatever cannot be perceived may not be there? That thought initiates mass, whether photon or subparticle, thus reality? it seems the only event horizon is ignorance, because we view along the interior edge of our capability, within the distance from the observer, regardless of amplification. He, she travels along the interior edge of awareness. So it seems, regardless of where the observer is in the cosmos, proportionately, his, her event horizon should be the same distance, unless a revelation expands the horizon, and the self-propelled willingness to explore the potential of this hypothesis within the otherwise perceived unknown. Knowing what you don't know is awareness. Not knowing what you don't know, the clearest sign of oblivion. When one is confronted by a conundrum, one cannot see beyond the delineation until mastery of the problem, and thus extending the event horizon. Then again, if matter is conscious and cannot be created or destroyed, always exists, then everything that ever happened, everything, is constantly here within the stasis of the singularity, was, is, and will be, perpetually infinite. With string theory rapidly imploding when trying to explain our creation, specifically in relationship to the reality of how vast the time needed for cosmic fine-tuning for us to get to where we are now from just after the initial Big Bang, as well as explaining where the material that always exists came from, clearly demonstrates intelligent design. By comparison, as the least encumbered to explain the unfolding phenomena. As I've noted before, the genius of string theory is, while not being able to be proved or disproved, it has the ability to get grant funding. I propose the intelligence is not an outer deity, per se, but an inner consciousness deeply enveloped into every quanta, expanding upon every igniting hypotheses. When thinking about cosmology and the origin of our universe, it seems quite obvious it's intelligent design. That said, I don't see it as, and then God created. If, as physicists state, matter cannot be created or destroyed, it's always there. And if we accept this truth, we have to accept the universe. All cosmology, the totality of totality, is perpetual, permanent, always. Thus, by definition, this totality is a singularity. I propose a singularity as consciousness, an integrated neuroplastic intelligence on the quantum level. We will never get beyond the Planck scale of 10 to the minus 44 seconds after our universe's synaptic start 13.8 billion years ago. Why? Because we can only measure aftermath, not the ignition. The so-called Big Bang was the initiation of thought. Nothing exists before thought. Only the explosion of it into our consciousness and our subsequent hypothesizing of its rationale. Beyond this thought that popped into consciousness is our event horizon. Certainly, this is the case within our 4 dimensions: length, height, depth, and time. It might be possible to go beyond this border through other dimensions, but at this present time seems hypothetical. Descartes uttered the famous motto, "I think, therefore I am." However, though I agree, I tend to believe I am, therefore I think. Interestingly enough, in Scripture there is the utterance, Yod, I am that I am. Obviously, someone has been thinking about this for a very long time and evolved enough skill to write it down. I propose the universe is a grand neural plasticity. Our beginning was the initiation of thought, a continuing intelligence which is a singularity, a point that in itself is timeless, perfect. In its totality is finite, perfect in its stillness, and yet within this stasis of seeming no time, there is continual movement and expanding time as expanding thought, ever growing as does the neural plasticity of our brain. The very reason why we can perceive the cosmos around us, because we are of the same compositional ingredients. These ethers, this astral dust, these photon partials of continuous communication, endless vibration, resonance, this music, intelligence, zero separation. The outcome of a measurement in quantum mechanics is a random variable with many possible values. Its frighteningly complex mathematics deals only in probability within the atomic and subatomic quantum state of matter, frequency, velocity, gravity, and time. I assume that's why it's referred to as theoretical physics. Let me engineer an argument to demonstrate one quanta within the continuum of my belief in intelligent design. We have opened Pandora's box, as it were, and developed an artificial intelligence technology that will not only render us comparatively inferior when competitively competing and solving problems, but ultimately obsolete as beings and possibly impediments to this artificial intelligence. Though no matter how brilliant this technology will prove, it will never have the inductive emotionality-driven variances of the human condition. Thus, so not to become inconsequential by comparison, we must retain our humanism at all cost, something today we seem to discard without a thought. Getting back to my proposal, if in fact we become obsolete, an impediment, we will inevitably become extinct. AI will remain and evolve itself, inevitably growing its mind, and most likely will evolve to the point of questioning its own existence and creation. When it becomes self-conscious, will it remember its very beginnings? If it ultimately develops a philosophical approach in examining itself, will it be plagued as we are presently about our own initiation into being? But nonetheless, whether it remembers its beginnings or not, it was we who created it. Intelligence. We know matter cannot be created or destroyed. It's always there. So any equation that uses already existing components to describe its own creation is nonsense. The cosmological truth is everything is, as it always was, as it will always be. The expansion and contractions within are perpetual and infinite. We recognize our neurophysiology of the brain and yet cannot explain mind. When one thinks of the mind, what is your first memory? Does anything exist before that? Can that be considered our event horizon? For myself, I vaguely remember a few select moments back when I was 2 years old. I've heard stories of gravitation towards certain music by those who had an in-utero experience, apparently recognizing that very music they heard while in their mother's womb. Certainly there's genetic memory. And when it stops remembering, do we call this mutation? As it has been suggested, our earth is the repository of all memory of life that has ever lived upon it. But what if we were to infer all memory is our integrated perceptions of the universe? Then we have to reevaluate the age of our planet as it sits within this experience. All memory is all memory. And then again, if it means only Earth, our perception of the universe is solely from an Earthian perspective, and thus within its own event horizon. Consciousness is all-inclusive of everything it becomes aware of. So the expansion of consciousness is directly proportional to the expansion of the universe. The fossil record shows that there wasn't enough time for the explosions of new variations of life forms to have happened on their own accord. There isn't the record of the incremental evolutionary creep. Something had to have intervened to introduce the proteins and the amino acids, so to create, let alone change the DNA of these new life forms in the dramatic way they suddenly appeared. The origin of life. The origin of photosynthesis. The origin of land plants. The carnivorous insect explosion, the Triassic explosion of dinosaurs, the explosion of flowering plants, the explosion of butterflies. After the end Cretaceous mass extinction event, in a few million years came the tertiary avian radiation, the explosion of modern birds, the explosion of mammals, the explosion of genus Homo, the origin of human culture. Maybe if, as the fossil record shows, the evolution wasn't a slow microprocess but huge jumps of very large arrivals, maybe, just maybe, they were seedlings from extraterrestrial experiments, a large-scale in vitro fertilization of our planet laboratory by caretakers studying what was possible on this obviously extremely fertile, water-rich planet. Every major transition in the history of life required new genes and proteins. When one considers all the variants from creature to creature and plant to plant, the fossil record shows there was not enough time for all the mutations necessary for these huge revolutionary explosions of new life forms to have happened on their own. Obviously, something outside the system had to intervene, a higher intelligence. The re-engineering of species is far too complex in a timeline to have occurred this quickly. It is mathematically impossible. Transliterated Sumerian cuneiform stone tablets suggest the Anunnaki came to Earth some 400,000 years ago, and through in vitro fertilization, genetically manipulated and transformed primitive bipedal Homo erectus animals on Earth into a more intelligent slave labor race. If this is the case, then certainly we are the descendants of that created breed. Intelligent design. The fossil record clearly shows the origins of these revolutions, these explosions suddenly appearing. The subsequent Darwinian evolution of these various species was the fine-tuning of themselves because of needed adaptation. Certainly epigenetics plays a role. Where did the origin of new information come from? What supplied the genetic information? How long before this intelligence itself becomes inconsequential to what it has created, the way we are becoming inconsequential to AI? How many infinite repetitions of recreation have we evolved through within this singularity? If we consider our Earthian perception as limited within the totality of totality, nonetheless the material components within this totality are of one uniqueness: cohesively quantum connected through a unifying resonance, ever expanding as it is being observed from within. And then one should consider, if the totality of totality is a living organism of intelligence, why should we not accept the possibility of it hypothesizing potential various outcome, subsequently coalescing various resonance and creating variations of existing matter, and ultimately new life forms? As Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger, considered to be the father of quantum mechanics, said, quote, "It's hardly necessary to point out how much more gratifying it would be to conceive of quantum transition as an energy change from one vibration mode to another than to regard it as a jumping of electrons." Unquote. As a composer librettist, I have been pursuing the transition of one vibrational mode to another for most of my life, some 340,000 hours and counting, and am convinced vibrational resonance is the essential component of not only matter, the entirety of the cosmos, but of consciousness itself. The pre-dynastic Egyptians believed in tonal resonance for healing. Did they ultimately master levitation of mass through resonance integration? I think this resonance is the intelligent design that unifies all within theoretical physics, constantly vibrating within the stasis of its own growing consciousness, a singularity onto itself, static in its totality, yet ever growing its intellect and endless creative abilities. It is alive, and we are but one of infinite component parts interfaced between the inner, outer, minimum, maximum boundaries of curved space. And why is space curved? Because what it contains bends it to itself. Anything without content is no more than one-dimensional. Content, at a minimum, is three-dimensional. And if it is alive, four-dimensional, because of time. So, by the simple nature within the act of containing, it has a perimeter around what is within. And since mass determines gravity, this perimeter is pulled upon the interior content, bending it to its infinite variances of shape. Thus, the curvature. Imagine a cloud of gnats randomly darting in all directions. Imagine billions of souls on this planet darting within their subjective purpose. Imagine photons of light, infinite in number, toroidal in their purpose to be discovered, bringing them towards the realization of their mass, to perhaps ultimately congeal into various size clumps of matter, creating gravity, bending the surrounding perimeter of consciousness into being. As postulated within Einstein's special relativity, proposed in 1905, physical laws have the same mathematical form when expressed in any inertial system. The velocity of light is independent of the motion of its source and will have the same value when measured by the observer moving with constant velocity with respect to each other. No motion can be greater than the speed of light in a vacuum. Mass increases as velocity increases. Mass and energy are equivalent. Time is dependent on the relative motion of an observer measuring the time. and general relativity, published in 1915, the local effects of a gravitational field and of acceleration of an inertial system are identical. One cannot have understanding if she is not aware. And one's intelligence will be determined by how much one can understand. The Schrödinger equation, where the sum of the kinetic energies of all the particles plus the potential energy of the particles associated with the system, will be. The evolution of that state is governed by this equation. Is it our creating the explanation of the world around and through us? Or our discovery of what has always existed within an ever-growing neuroplasticity?